Again, it's not wrong to make your character nice if your character happens to be nice. But what is wrong is to try to save the cat when you have a character who would prefer to kick that cat. Because just imagine if Vince Gilligan followed the Save the Cat rules. I'm Jacob Kruger, and this is the Write Your Screenplay podcast. On this podcast, rather than criticizing movies and TV shows 2 thumbs up or 2 thumbs down, we talk about what we can learn from them as screenwriters. And along the way, we learn the skills we need not only to write better screenplays, but to live better lives as artists. This episode, we're going to be looking at Vince Gilligan's new show, Pluribus, episodes 1 and 2. So if you have not yet watched Pluribus, it is way, way, way too good for me to spoil it for you. So go watch episodes 1 and 2 and then come back to this podcast. Now, what we're going to be looking at is the question about how to make your main character likable. If you've been a screenwriter for a while, you've probably heard the term save the cat. If you want the audience to fall in love with your main character, they should rescue a cat out of a tree, be nice to a child, do something in those early pages to show us that they're a nice person that we should like. And there are a lot of other ideas that kind of fall into that category. The idea that audiences are supposed to like main characters. But if you look at Carol, the Ray Seahorn character, the main character of Pluribus, who's in literally almost every frame of this show, you're going to notice Ray ain't saving any cats, and neither is Vince Gilligan. She's not farting rainbows. She's not singing a happy song. She's not showing us what a nice person she is. In fact, she's doing nearly the exact opposite. Carol is a fantastically successful novelist in the prime of her career. She's wealthy, she's powerful, she can do pretty much anything she wants, and she is potentially the most miserable person on earth. She has a disdain for her audience, and she has a wonderful ability to take things that most people would kill for and turn them into a pity party for herself. So how does Vince Gilligan make us fall in love with her? And beyond that, how does Vince Gilligan pull us into the storytelling of Pluribus, this incredibly challenging structure? Because it's not just the idea of saving the cat that Vince Gilligan is thumbing his nose at. Vince is, in fact, kind of poking at nearly every classical idea of how structure is supposed to work. So let's talk about how Pluribus is built. When we meet Carol in the first episode of Pluribus, she is at a book signing event where she is being swarmed by adoring and loving fans. We sit with her for a shockingly long time, watching her read from her romance fantasy novel. We sit there so long that we are kind of as bored with what she's reading as she is, right? And if you listen to the podcast on the studio, or if you've taken my classes, we're talking about the introduction of your main character is potentially the most important moment in your movie, right? Because it's the moment that's going to attract a star to your movie. It's the moment that gives the audience the opportunity to either tune in or tune out. And we are taught that this moment is supposed to be super disruptive. It's supposed to be super exciting. We're supposed to see them doing something that we would kill to do. And here with Carol, what are we doing? We're sitting on the most boring book reading ever. This isn't supposed to work, right? And we're not just sitting there for a short period of time. We're sitting there for a long period of time watching a fictional novelist read from a fictional book that doesn't frickin' exist. This should detach us from the character. So let's talk about why it doesn't. If this was actually the first scene of Pluribus, even if Vince Gilligan was writing it, there's a good chance that you would feel nervous that maybe this wasn't going to be a very exciting movie. But Vince Gilligan doesn't start on Carol. He starts with these astronomers who have just discovered a message from space, and they want to know what it is, and we want to know what it is. We are pulled into this mystery. The astronomers think that potentially it's some kind of encrypted message, maybe 4 layers deep. But then one of the astronomers realizes, no, it's not encoded. I know what this is. Now, Vince Gilligan plays a really interesting little game here. He doesn't tell us what it is. Instead, we cut to a lab. We're watching this team of many, many, many scientists dripping stuff into their little vials, doing some kind of experiment. It's a beautiful image. This is something to think about. Anytime you're looking at an image that you have seen before in a movie, that you have to find some little thing that makes it special. And what Vince Gilligan does as director here is really simple. He just puts all of the scientists in different color suits. So they're in those kind of paper protective garments, but they're all these different colors, right? And they're all kind of working in unison, which kind of almost sets up the world of this piece, right? Even before what's about to happen, that there is a world where people collaborate to do incredible things. And these characters do accomplish an incredible thing. They sequence some kind of an mRNA code. They start to test it on rats, but the tests aren't going well. And again, we don't know exactly what this is. We don't even know yet that it's an mRNA code. All we know is that they're doing some kind of experiment and that they're being extremely cautious, that they're now in these full body suits, right? The kind of suits that you would wear for an Ebola kind of outbreak, right? And in order to leave the room where the rats are, they need to be showered off in this sealed compartment, right? So we understand that there's some kind of risk. Maybe it's some kind of virus. Maybe it's something dangerous. So what's Vince Gilligan doing? He's building all this feeling of danger. And then we find that the experiment isn't actually going well. The rats aren't dying from whatever this virus is. In fact, they're not doing anything much at all. And they're, in fact, about to exterminate the rats, right? Now, this is also something to think about with where the piece is going, because one of the concepts in this script is the almost genocidal consequences of our actions. Now, we'll talk more about exactly how that works when we get there. But for now, let's just suffice it to say that one of the scientists is a little hesitant. She doesn't really want to kill these rats, right? There's something that doesn't feel good about that to her. And in fact, the other scientist kind of gently ribs her about it, like, you're not going to go very far in this field if you can't kill a rat. So they're about to put all these rats down. Their experiments just failed. And then she notices that one is dead. And they take it out of the cage, and she's trying to feel its heart to see if there's a heartbeat. But she can't feel it through her thick gloves. So she takes one of her gloves off. And of course, the rat bites her. And while we could debate the little technical details of whether a scientist would actually do that in this kind of environment, or whether what follows would actually happen, let's just say that Vince Gilligan is navigating, as he always does, towards the fun. So she gets bit. She goes to put her hand in some kind of hand wash, and her partner catches the rat. And then in the background, while he's with the rat, we see her hands start to shake. And we realize something is very, very, very wrong. Now, again, in a little bit of a stretch of good protocol, he tries to pull her out of the contained room. And then some strange things start to happen. They start to kiss people. When the female scientist does it, it's kind of a terrifying thing, something we might see in a film like The Last of Us. But then we see the male scientist kind of skipping down the hall, approaching a janitor and gently kissing him on the lips. And we start to go, where the hell are we? And then suddenly we are in a room with a lot of people. And we're watching them all work together, swabbing their mouths, packaging their saliva, swabbing their mouth, packaging their saliva in perfect unison. And you can see that this is a mirror to that earlier scene we saw of the scientists working together. But now it is perfectly synchronized, right? It's amplified to another level. We start to realize there's some kind of shared goal that they're doing together, and that they are trying to spread whatever this virus is that they have. So this is the teaser of Pluribus. And you'll notice in episode 2, we also start with a teaser that's away from the main character. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's something that they start to do in every episode. Again, I've only watched up to episode 2 because that's all that's out at the time of the recording of this podcast. But when we build a pilot, we're also building a blueprint, right? And so part of the blueprint of how this show works is that episodes start away from Carol. But once we're with Carol, we pretty much stay with her. The other little secret about how this episodes work is that the teasers build mystery. They make us wonder why. So in the teaser, in the second episode, we're now in Morocco, and we're watching a bunch of stuff going on that we'll talk about later. But we watch a woman dressed in dirt and rags walk into some kind of space we don't even recognize. For a moment, it feels like maybe she's in some kind of like starship, but it turns out she's just in a plane. We just have never seen the cockpit from this angle before. And we watch this woman who's kind of seemingly dressed in rags fly this empty plane, and we don't know where she's going. But we know she's doing something important because we can see, again, this perfect synchronicity. Right? So these are 2 episodes with 2 teasers that build a sense of mystery about what's going on and that amplify the complicated world building and the sci-fi elements of the piece. Now, not all shows officially have teasers, but the first minute of your episode is always a teaser in a way. Because the first minute of your episode is pulling us into the world and the feeling of the piece. You want to use that teaser. You want to use those first images. You want to use those first few pages, whether they include your main character or not. You want to use them to grab your audience. Now, how does all this relate to us falling in love with Carol? If we started on a surly, wealthy, powerful, unhappy, miserable, for no frickin' reason, best-selling author, we probably wouldn't fall in love with her. But when we cut from this strange, mysterious, magical sequence with a clear threat that we kind of think we know what it is. Okay, this is another plague movie or another zombie movie. Right? This is some version of The Last of Us. And then suddenly we meet this miserable woman who's so upset about her mundane problems like success, right? What starts to happen is a dramatic irony starts to grow in us. See, we're experienced moviegoers. We know she's our main character. If we didn't know just from the structure, we know from the casting. We know that we're going to be following her. And we're already going, oh, this is our hero? So I want to use this to introduce a concept that I think is really important. If your audience isn't falling in love with your character, sometimes the problem isn't in the character, but it's in the world or the environment or the characters around them. And we can help the audience fall in love with the character by looking at what's surrounding the character. It's not that Save the Cat is wrong. If we met Carol and she was baking cookies for a Girl Scout troop, saving a houseless guy, rescuing a kitten from a tree, and we would understand she's our main character, we could fall in love with her that way too. But what I'd like to suggest to you is that it's not the niceness of the character that makes us fall in love with them. It's the clear point of view of the character. What makes us fall in love with Carol is that we get her. We get her point of view and we get what she wants. What does she want? What she wants is some fucking meaning in her life. She is being celebrated for work that she despises by people that she disdains. She is being celebrated, all of her success, all of her identity rests around a series of novels that she's not even proud of, that in fact she's embarrassed by. We get her. We get that she's a sellout who isn't living up to her own standards. And we also get that she is a miserable human being that would make lemons out of lemonade given any circumstances. She could write the next Cormac McCarthy novel and she would find a way to somehow feel bad about it. That's just who she is. What we get is her point of view and what she wants. And that's what allows us to connect, because there's a part of all of us that feels like, hey, I'm not living up to my potential. There's a part of all of us that feels like, I wish my life had more meaning to it. There's a part of all of us that's at war with what our society values, what we get rewarded for in our lives versus what we really want to be doing, right? There's a wrestling with that in all of us. So this is the first element is we gotta see her point of view. We got to get what she wants. But the second part of it is some part of us needs to identify with some element of it. We might not be miserable people like Carol. We might be the kind of people that, man, if our book sold millions of copies, we'd be the happiest people on earth. We might be the kind of people that if we were walking through an airport and saw our book on the lowest shelf, we wouldn't be angry. We'd be amazed that our book was selling at an airport. And we certainly might be the kind of people, if we wanted to fix it, would go fix it ourselves, as opposed to waiting for our partner to go do it as if it were her job. So we might not be nasty, miserable people like Carol. But what we are people who, like Carol, at least on some level, can understand what it feels like to not be living up to your potential and to be at odds with our society. Again, it's not wrong to make your character nice if your character happens to be nice. But what is wrong is to try to save the cat when you have a character who would prefer to kick that cat. Because just imagine if Vince Gilligan followed the save the cat rules and didn't have his confidence yet, and read some book or some development executive said, hey, Vince, you just have to make her likable. Let her rescue a cat out of a tree. Make her be sweet. Make her do something. Oh, maybe she could do something so nice for these fans. Sure, that's a way to get the audience to like her. But we'd actually lose the whole ironic hook of the piece. As Vince Gilligan puts it, the hook of Pluribus is that the most miserable woman on earth needs to save the world from happiness. That's the hook. But the hook doesn't always come to us from the beginning. Sometimes we have to follow the characters to get the hook. And so what I want you to understand is when you are learning these techniques, anytime somebody tells you this is what you must do, that person is lying to you. They're not necessarily lying on purpose. They might be telling you how they write, but they're not telling you how a movie is written. What we do know is if we want to write a show or a movie that's going to connect with a big audience, we need to get them to fall in love with the character in some way. But really what that means is we want them to have an emotional reaction to the character. We want them to understand where the character is coming from and see some piece of themselves in that. And we want them to get the character's point of view and what the character wants. And if we can do that, how we do it, well, that is the art of being a screenwriter. But what we don't want to do is make a mean character nice or a nice character mean just because somebody told us to. We've got to follow the character that already lives inside of us. What you do need to know is that characters with a negative valence, characters who are unhappy, characters who are stuck, characters who are sad, characters who are angry but not funny, characters who are depressed, characters who are passive, characters who are rude. What we do need to understand is that we've got to do more work to get the audience to fall in love with those characters than we do for characters who are super kind, right? Think about who you're inviting to your birthday party. You're probably super excited to invite your super fun friends, your super competent friends, your super kick-ass friends, your super can-do friends, your super enthusiastic friends, your super friendly friends, your friends who are going to help you out when you need some help, right? You want to invite those people. And it's not that you don't care about your sad friends, your depressed friends, your angry friends, your grumpy friends. You love those friends too, right? But they're an acquired taste. They took time to grow on you. So you've got to do more work when you've got a character like Carol who's got a negative valence. The first game that Vince Gilligan is playing is going like, well, I'm going to create a mysterious world that's going to contrast with the mundanity of her misery. And I'm going to find some irony there, right? Because she is about to experience a zombie apocalypse, and she's worried about she's rich for selling the wrong kind of book. So what's wonderful here is Vince Gilligan is getting us to understand her and also to judge her. And he's doing that with context. He's also playing a little game, which is let's get you really excited before I do the boring stuff, because I know the boring stuff is risky. But we've got to feel the boring stuff. Again, we're going to feel the boring stuff with specificity, right? We're going to sit in this reading for a really long time until we get that this book is not exactly literature. Until we actually identify with what Carol is feeling, which is this sucks. This is embarrassing. And the people who love it are embarrassing. Just in case we don't get it, we're going to watch the endless line of people who want their books signed, her fans. And we're going to find wonderful specificity and humor. Here's the guy with the sword, right, who thinks it's a good idea to put the sword out. And we're going to let Carol be kind of cute with him and go, you got to put that sword back before the manager finds out, right? We're going to do these little things that help us have fun with her misery. And then just in case we didn't get it, we're going to cut outside and we're going to learn exactly how miserable she is and exactly how she feels about these fans and exactly how she feels about her success. And we're going to give her a partner who, quite frankly, she's not that nice to, but who clearly loves her. Right? So this is the next little trick he's playing. Unlike Carol, her partner is a relatively well-adjusted human being. She's playing the game by the rules of the world, and she's kind of grateful for what they have and thinks Carol should be too. So this is the next little tool that Vince Gilligan is using. He's giving Carol a foil that provides contrast. And he's allowing somebody to ask the question that we're asking, which is, why are you so freaking miserable? Right? He's poking at Carol. And he's also showing you that even though maybe you kind of think she's a jerk, there's somebody that you can identify with that loves her. So we've got these two little elements, right, that are helping us connect to a difficult character. Now, I want to be really clear. These are not the only two elements that you can use. There are thousands of elements that you can use. There are thousands of permutations. The goal is really simple. If we're writing something that is for a commercial audience, we've got to get identification with the character. Now, again, that's not true in every movie or TV show. If you look at Poor Things, we start in like weirdo land, right? And it takes us time to actually be able to connect to her and understand what's going on, right? It's not every show or movie that needs to start from a place of empathy. But when we're doing something that we want mass appeal and we want to be able to get past the people with commercial fears and we want a lot of money to do what we want to do, we've got to get that empathetic connection for the producer to feel safe enough to go like, yeah, people are going to watch this. Okay, so here's where we go from here. Carol's going to end up at a bar being miserable, trying to drive drunk. Her partner won't let her. They go to a bar, her partner's not drinking, she's pressuring her partner to have a drink, right? Oh God, this is a problematic woman. So the next little trick that Vince Gilligan uses to make us care about this problematic woman is to torture the hell out of her. She's outside the bar smoking a cigarette with her friend. We know they're in a zombie movie. We know that the zombie apocalypse is about to happen around her while she's bitching about her perfect life. And we watch a guy walk out of the bar behind her, and you can see this is the same game. We know the irony, right? We know he's about to eat it while she's miserable about basically a life we'd all kill for. It's the same game that he played with the teaser and the cut to her. We're now playing it again. And of course, that man crashes his car. Carol runs to help him. I guess you could argue that this is a save the cat moment, but I think it's more of a, hey, I'm in the middle of a zombie apocalypse moment, because also soon her partner will start shaking and fall to the ground. And the moment that happens, she's trying to save her partner. She doesn't give a crap about the guy. In fact, there's even a moment where she tries to push the guy out of the truck so she can save her partner instead. Right? She's going to end up in the bar. Everybody's having the same reaction. She's going to drive her partner to the hospital. At the hospital, everyone's having the same reaction. And again, we think we know where we are, right? We've already seen what happened with the mouse and what happened with the scientist, and we know these people are going to wake up and they're going to try to infect Carol. In fact, we're already telling ourselves, oh, we're in The Last of Us. One person who's immune to a zombie virus, and all these people are going to chase her. But then, suddenly, the episode twists. As she makes her zombie movie escape from the hospital with her dead partner in the back of the truck, a partner who for some reason has not woken up from all this, we start to see some weird things in the background. We start to see people start to work together with fire extinguishers, putting out fires. And this doesn't look like typical zombie stuff. She arrives at her house, and here are the creepy zombie kids that we expected, but they want to help her find her key. And finally, she turns on her TV, and the TV is talking directly to her. And now we're starting to realize what's going on. See, she is in a zombie movie. But these are happy zombies. What actually happened is that the rapture has occurred on Earth, right? Nearly everyone on Earth has been raptured up to heaven, except they've stayed here. Now they're perfectly connected, kind of like we're becoming with AI, right? Where any human being can access all the knowledge in the world in an instant. Suddenly, they are working together. They are at a place of perfect peace, and it feels so good. In fact, the Secretary of Agriculture, who's acting as president, the president having unfortunately died, is talking directly to Carol and is basically telling her, hey, you, we care about you. And even though for some reason you are immune to this, we're going to take care of you. We're going to figure out how you can become a part of us so that you can have this rapturous experience too. So what Vince Gilligan is doing is he's taking the traditional zombie thing and he's turning it inside out. The zombies are freaking happy. The main character is freaking miserable. And by doing this, he's asking some really profound questions about heaven, about our dream for a better world, about happiness, about the importance of individuality versus the importance of working together, about capitalism versus socialism. So there's an idea that is very popular right now that, again, is a brilliant idea, that your main character should have a point of view about the world and that you should seduce your audience into believing that point of view. And that the antagonist should also have what Michael Arndt calls an antagonist aria, right? Where they are basically singing the song of the opposite idea. And that in this way, we're going to codify your character's idea and we're going to go on a journey with her in relation to her idea. And the idea is that you want the audience's buy-in for their idea. And then if you're writing a Meg LaFave movie like Inside Out, by the end of the movie, they're going to realize that, oh my God, I'm wrong. At the same moment that the character realizes, oh my God, I'm wrong. So there's this idea that we want these binary points of view. And that, again, can work in a movie. Inside Out, Inside Out 2, these are two of the greatest movies of all time. These are brilliant, brilliant films. But what Vince Gilligan is showing is that the opposite can work too. So he plays a little game with us. At the beginning, even at this point, we feel like Carol feels. We are living her nightmare with her. And let's face it, that nightmare is nightmarish, right? We are getting all that great zombie shit that we've seen in 1,000 other zombie movies, but in new, visually spectacular ways. Yes, it feels like a little twist on a zombie movie, right? But we get it. Their brains are all infected with the virus, and they are coming for her. And somehow she's going to have to save herself. We are pitching ourselves a point of view. And Carol says, I've seen this movie before. What happens when I say no? And we are with Carol for this moment. We are with Carol. We don't want their help. We don't want to be one of the brain dead masses. We don't want to be a zombie, and we don't want her to be one. We are with her for just a moment. But it's not going to be until the end of the series or the end of the season that Vince Gilligan starts to poke a hole at that and makes us go, oh, maybe we're wrong. He's going to start poking holes at that at the beginning of episode 2. Because what's going to happen, the strange woman who flew the plane is going to show up in Carol's yard and help her bury her friend. And Carol, who doesn't want the help, is going to end up having to accept the help. And Carol's going to come up with a plan because there are about 12 other people like her who weren't affected. And of those, about 5 of them speak English. And she's going to bring them together, and together they're going to save the world from the zombie apocalypse. And she makes her little aria to them. And they're basically like, no. One dude's flying around in Air Force One. All these, we'll call them zombies, right? Are beautiful model zombies want to have sex with him. They want to cater to his every need. He's living in heaven. Another has a child who's become like one of them. And she wants to see her child as still her child, even though he's obviously been transformed. Another wants to become like one of them so that she can rejoin her family. All of these people are pretty much at peace. And in fact, the mother of the child has a bandage over her head, and she's got some words for Carol that start to poke at Carol's point of view. Now, for you to understand this, let's go back a little bit. There's a moment when Zosha, the woman who flew the plane at the beginning of episode 2, who is going to end up becoming a kind of spiritual guide for Carol. When Zosha and Carol get into a confrontation, and Carol unleashes the full venom of her rage on Zosha. And suddenly, Zosha is shaking again. But it turns out it's not just Zosha that is shaking. It is everybody. Carol's anger has shaken the entire world. In the aftermath, when Zosha has recovered, Carol asks her, how many people died when I lost control of my rage? And Zosha really beats around the bush about it. Now, what I want to show you is that this is Vince Gilligan playing the same game he played earlier in episode 1 with Carol's partner. He's using the contrast of Zosha's care for Carol to make us care about Carol. And he's using the horror of her trying to protect Carol from the reality of her actions, to allow us to care about her and want to protect her, even though what she has just done is obviously horrible. She ends up saying essentially a few, and Carol says, a few what? A few hundred? A few thousand? She never fully gets the answer. But here, at dinner with all the other people like her, she finally does get the answer. She calls them all out and basically asks Zosha how many people actually died. And it turns out it's close to 1 billion people died in the conversion of the entire human race to whatever this virus is. She kind of sarcastically says, gotta break a few eggs, I guess. But then the woman with the bandage on her mouth turns around to Carol and gives her the real number of how many people died from her little loss of control of her anger. And it turns out that that answer is 11 million, right? A Holocaust-level genocide based on her unleashing her anger on one person. So this is the opposite of saving the cat. I hope you can see that, right? We have a character who basically in episode 2 has killed 11 million people because she can't control her rage. And just in case you don't get it, after all this has already occurred, she does it again. Not on purpose, but because she can't control her own anger. We have a woman at the center of this who is so out of control of her own misery and her own anger that she has basically twice now killed millions of people. And we are poking holes at her belief system that she needs to save the world from the zombie apocalypse, because none of these people agree with her. And at the same time, Vince Gilligan's not playing in these false binaries, these black and white ideas that, oh, maybe the zombies are totally good, because it turns out, yeah, the zombies killed about 1 billion people too. And they have their problems as well. For example, they're unable to say no to sex with Mr. Flying Around in Air Force One. Now, that doesn't mean they don't want it, and it doesn't mean that they do. But as Zosha tells us, they can't say no. They can't choose, because choosing would hurt somebody. And they can't hurt somebody. So here we start to see the central problem, right? We've built an Eden on earth, but it's an Eden without choice. We're back to that central question of that old biblical story, right? To choose is to lose paradise. But to not choose, well, is that a paradise we want to live in? What Vince Gilligan is doing is so much more complicated than the rules of screenwriting that you have probably been taught. Instead of getting you to agree with a point of view that's flawed, only to see the mistake in your own reasoning by the very end, he's actually got you caught in that gray area between two sides of a dialectic, both of which are not clear to us. We actually don't know if we believe Carol or if we believe the zombies or if we believe a little bit about both of them. We don't actually know if the world is a paradise or if she should be rooting for Carol to save us. But what we do know is that Vince Gilligan is poking at our fundamental beliefs about the world. And that there's a metaphor here for what is the cost of our anger and our choices. What is the cost of our self-involvement? What is the cost of our direction of our misery or our anger on one human being as that actually does ripple around the world? Are the effects of that actually as horrific as the effects of Carol's anger towards Zosha? Have we built a miserable world because we can't control our anger? And would we be better if we didn't have the choice that would allow us to hurt other people? Would that be a heaven or would that be a hell? You don't get to tell those kinds of stories if you are working within the format of a formula or a rule set. You get to tell those kinds of stories by connecting to a real character who's complicated, by connecting to the real questions that you have in yourself. Where's your anger? Where's your misery? Where's your mistakes? Where's your beauty? Where's your fantastical longing? What would heaven look like for you and what would be wrong with it? You find that by going on a real journey where you don't totally know the answers. And I'm not pretending that you don't need to work your craft to actually land that stuff. There are tools that you need, many of which I've described in this podcast. Right? You need to find a way to bring the audience along with you. But please don't do it by following a formula. All these formulas that you've been taught, they're formulas that other writers have figured out to build their movie, their TV show. And maybe someday there's going to be a formula that you figure out. That's how you build yours. But what I'd like to suggest to you is that it's the journey of finding that, of asking yourself, what story do I want to tell? And then how am I going to deliver it? Rather than what does the audience want and how do I conform to that? It's that journey that is going to unleash your voice and allow you to write the kind of disruptive script that actually gets you noticed in this competitive industry. Now, I know a lot of people will dismiss this and say, hey, not everybody's Vince Gilligan. But what I'd like to suggest to you is that there was a time when Vince Gilligan wasn't Vince Gilligan, where people were asking the same questions about him, when he was writing this unlikely show called Breaking Bad that didn't even get picked up by a major network. Somewhere in you is that disruptive voice. And there are a million tools you can use to take and shape that disruptive voice. But when you start to use those tools without the real journey underneath, without the real characters, without the real questions in yourself, when you start to use those tools, you don't end up with a movie or a TV show. You end up with a shell of one. Not every show needs to be as disruptive as Pluribus. Not every character needs to be as complicated as Carol. Not every TV series needs to make the audience wrestle with our fundamental assumptions about the world. But what the shows that you love have in common, what the movies you love have in common, are characters who are a real embodiment of something inside of the writer, wrestling with real questions that the writer is trying to make sense of, going on a real journey that transcends what we are expecting. Because that is actually what makes Pluribus so unbelievably entertaining to watch, is that we actually don't know this formula. We haven't seen it before. Sure, Vince Gilligan starts us off in a world we think we understand. But we're only halfway through the pilot when we realize that we are in a more complicated world than we ever imagined. That we've actually transcended the formula. And we're in a nowhere's land where we can't anticipate what Carol's going to do next. Where we don't actually know what the right thing is. And what that does is it pulls us, the audience, into the dilemma of your character. We're no longer looking for the outside judging, going, don't run up the stairs into the house. We're instead on the inside going, What would I do if I was Carol? What's the right decision here and what's wrong? We are as scared as she is because we are looking at the show through her eyes. I hope that you're enjoying this podcast and it's helping your writing. If it is, we have an incredible in-person event coming up where you can meet other podcast listeners, other members of our community, live in person with me and Stephen Bagatorian. We're going to be teaching a weekend intensive in Los Angeles. It's our first in-person class since 2020. It's going to be the weekend of January 10th and 11th, where we are going to be attacking screenwriting from two sides of your brain, from the subconscious, creative writing brain and the conscious adult editing brain. We're going to be teaching you with each concept we explore how to build it from these two different parts of your mind. And in the process, how to build this perfect dance that we all need that gives us that real feeling of flow, voice, craft, and art all working at the same time. So come check it out. Mark your calendars. You can find it on our website, writeyourscreenplay.com/LA. And I hope to see you there.